So if you ask anyone what they don't like about RWBY, I can almost guarantee you that one of the main points most people will bring up is that Cinder Fall is a bad character. Which isn't entirely true. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that her character is amazing either. She actually pays homage to a typical villain trope of wanting power and stopping at nothing to get it. We see this kind of development in a lot of anime, movies, and television shows. But some people really want to blow this woman out of proportion and say that she is without character or a terrible character. Now I can understand why most people think that, and to me, it's probably just because of how overly sexualized this character is. She has the same appeal as Lust from Full Metal Alchemist. Silky smooth voice, venomous attitude, and a confidence of a hardcore porn star walking onto a softcore set. Most people have a problem with that sort of character design and mindset, but not me. So why don't we delve in and try and break down why I feel that Cinder isn't that bad. Now if you are new here, be sure to click subscribe if you end up liking the video. It goes a long way to help me. Also, I'm doing a little experiment to try and understand how YouTube's algorithm works, so just do me a favor. If at any point this bores you, just mute it and play it in the background. If it doesn't bore you, watch it all the way through. Trust me guys, I think I've figured out something pretty neat, so even if you hate me, help me out. I appreciate it lads, it really does go a long way. And if you like me, well definitely help me out then, because I'm not going to explain it. Anyway, just trust me. Right off the bat, Cinder is introduced in a very interesting way. Nice and glowy, some serious usage of magic, and she, interestingly enough, was never intended to have this power as a result of being a maiden. She was just some super powerful, strange figurehead in the background. This actually works extremely well. She is the mysterious figurehead that wields some crazy power. That is not bad writing, and anyone that complains about her overall introduction clearly doesn't know too much about writing as a whole, in my opinion. So for the majority of Volume 1, Cinder is controlling things from the background, and only really steps forward at the end to make some spooky threats with her trusty cardboard cutout sidekicks. But we don't truly get to see her in action and interacting until Volume 2. Her introduction in this Volume 2 was actually really appropriate. Her subordinates are bickering and she steps forward to quell the argument, starting from a high point and lowering herself to their level, disregarding the affections of Emerald and flaunting her superiority. This perfectly establishes that Cinder is the big, scary boss, and it's usually pretty difficult for a female lead to pull this off, to be imposing and kind of elegant and noble at the same time. You can see a bastardized version of this in Weiss, not to insult your waifu or whatever, but Weiss comes off as superior due to the privilege of her name, albeit, she is significantly more immature. Cinder comes off as the mature counterpart to that, though we can pretty much assume her backstory based off of her fairy tale counterpart. More than likely a harsh upbringing where she was deprived of everything she rightfully deserved, and therefore longs for power and authority. It's pretty cookie cutter. And to me, that is a pretty compelling start to this villain's run. The only downside to this type of attitude is the same problem I had with Lust. Almost every single line of dialogue she says or has is sexualized, just because of the way that those lines are delivered. Her encounters with other characters do seem a bit odd, but I feel that is mostly due to her appearing to be leagues above the main antagonists or protagonists in terms of maturity and just the overall way the character carries herself. It's not bad enough to make me hate the character, but it definitely leaves a little change to be desired. She is scheming, conniving, and occasionally does them both at the same time, which I call skeeniving. As per main villain, she has a step-by-step plan to completely ruin her rival and the main cast, which again, isn't bad writing, it's just villainous writing. Her interactions with the main character, the almost casual way she dismisses the possibility of RWBY ever figuring anything out, it's all really nice. Volume 3 is where Cinder really shines through. In no small part due to her scheming and general evilness, we see a lot of cogs at work here, and are slowly shown that Cinder has more connections than we originally thought. With the maiden reveal, new theories sprout up and the character becomes even more interesting. The flashback episode does show us how she interacted with Mercury and Emerald, along with paving the way for what laid the groundwork for the character in general. She longs for power and is willing to steal it, She will do whatever it takes to feel that adrenaline going through her veins. Her speech didn't resonate too much with me, I guess just because I feel like some ominous voiceover to some tragedy shouldn't be used to emphasize that tragedy. This is something I would attribute more to bad writing overall, and not the character herself being terrible. Even her moment with Pyrrha, the talk of destiny, and Cinder's stark surprise at Ruby's ability, it was all fairly well done. And I think most of us remember that moment as we were just extremely shocked at Pyrrha's death. As with most things related to RWBY, after Volume 3, things went significantly downhill. For one, Cinder's character can't speak for the majority of Volume 4, and she is talked down to the entire time. She is labeled a failure and a pouty child. And when you paint your villains a certain way, eventually the audience is going to start seeing them that same way too. It does not get much better from there. Cinder holds a horrible grudge against RWBY, and while yes, she was maimed by RWBY's ability, in no small part was it her own fault that she ended up in that situation in the first place. While pursuing revenge does make sense, just the fact that Cinder lacks any humility in admitting this is really sad. Her character devolved into Salem, where she blames everyone but herself. And that's not really the point where I have issue with the character. Up until the end of Volume 3, Cinder was actually not that bad, and believe it or not, she was a decent antagonist to have, one whose origin could have been explored thoroughly. Let's not all forget the fact that she died and came back, which was one of the most headache-inducing moments of all time. I don't feel that Raven deserved to defeat Cinder, but at the same time I don't feel like Cinder deserved to lose to Raven. But I didn't mind overall. I just wish she hadn't come back from it, which might have had an interesting story development, as the last girl in Cinder's thoughts could have been Emerald, Raven, or even RWBY, which might have triggered some interesting conflicts in the future. Now this is exceptionally bad writing, guys, I'm not gonna lie, but people misunderstand that bad writing and a bad character are two totally different things. Adam became a bad character through writing alone. Crow was an amazing character through writing alone. Salem was a bad character from the beginning, and writing can't help that. You can have a perfectly great template for a character with interesting stories in the future, but with enough bad writing, those stories will lose their merit. Cinder was a character with a clearly traumatic past and some seriously unresolved issues, but she carried herself with a confidence and a swagger that just was wholly unique to the character, and her design was nothing short of eye-capturing. Now, she is a character full of cliches, with abilities that don't exactly make too much sense and motives that are even more confusing. Her initial want for power was perfect in its simplicity, mostly because there was so much room to keep it growing, but now that room is completely filled with nonsense. So in conclusion, is Cinder deserving of all this hate she gets? In my opinion, not really, guys. She was one of the better villains in the show up until the recent volumes. People just don't really tend to like the over-sexualized characters, which I can understand, and don't get me wrong, sometimes the character gets on my nerves. But as a whole, there was nothing really that bad about the fundamentals. We had an evil character that I felt should have been properly beaten and done with by the end of Volume 3. And that is the main thing Cinder suffers from, existing past the point where she should exist. It almost feels like the writers are desperately holding out for the character to have some form of redemption arc, but at this point Cinder really doesn't deserve one, because we haven't seen enough of her character in the first place. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll probably end up doing a rewrite for Cinder's character in an upcoming video. Until then, like, comment, and subscribe, boys.